The documentary provides a socio-historical analysis of violence, particularly gun violence in Los Angeles, tracing its roots from historical racial tensions and systemic issues to the rise of street gangs. The film begins with personal accounts from individuals who grew up in Los Angeles during the mid-20th century, a time when the neighborhood was majority white before a significant migration of black families from the South. The film highlights how the civil rights movement, with figures like Martin Luther King Jr., sparked hope and a search for a better future, but this was tragically halted by the Watts Rebellion in 1965. The rebellion is presented not as a random riot but as a politically charged response to years of police abuse and a lack of follow-up on community improvement suggestions. Following the rebellion, a new wave of activism emerged, with reformed street gang members joining forces with the Black Panther Party. The documentary presents the Panthers as a community-saving grace, providing food, education, and protection. However, their unapologetic stance and self-reliance, particularly their armed presence, was perceived as a threat by the government. The film details the FBI's counterintelligence program, COINTELPRO, created under J. Edgar Hoover during the Nixon administration. This program was designed to infiltrate and disrupt black leadership, including the Black Panther Party. The documentary highlights the role of an informant, William O'Neill, in the raid that led to the death of Fred Hampton, a key Panther leader. This act is framed as a deliberate effort to destroy black leadership and create a vacuum filled by violence. The film then pivots to the history of guns and gun violence, drawing a parallel between the accidental discovery of gunpowder by Chinese monks seeking immortality and the destructive nature of firearms today. It presents stark statistics on gun ownership in the United States, noting that it has the highest rate in the world, with more civilian-owned guns than people. The documentary contrasts this with stricter gun laws in other countries such as the UK, where police officers are not typically armed. The film explores the complexities of gun control, touching on open carry laws in states like Texas and Florida and the role of the Second Amendment as seen in the Kyle Rittenhouse case. It also includes a personal story of a child who was accidentally shot by a gun he mistook for a toy, emphasizing the tragic consequences of improperly secured firearms. The documentary also addresses the disproportionate impact of gun laws on minority communities, arguing that they can be used to perpetuate the prison industrial complex. It provides a chilling example of a young man receiving a long prison sentence for firearm possession without a victim, while other cases involving murder receive lighter sentences. It then connects historical slave patrols, or paddy rollers, to modern-day policing, suggesting a historical continuity of racial terrorism and psychological intimidation. It acknowledges that not all police officers are part of this historical pattern, including a testimonial from a black officer who joined the force to make a positive difference. The film also explores the devastating effects of the crack cocaine epidemic in the 1980s, which destabilized communities and led to a surge in crime rates. It connects this to the 1992 Los Angeles riots, which erupted after the acquittal of police officers involved in the beating of Rodney King. The riots are presented as a multicultural rebellion against injustice. The documentary concludes by examining the evolution of street gangs from social clubs into violent organizations. It explains how groups like the Crips and Bloods, originally formed for community protection and with principles like Crips don't kill Crips, devolved into brutal rivals due to internal conflicts and the absence of strong unifying leadership. The documentary ends on a somber note, lamenting that despite the passage of time, the cycle of violence, police brutality, and systemic injustice continues, with modern-day instances like the killings of Trayvon Martin and George Floyd serving as stark reminders that things have not changed for the better. Its exploration of violence in Los Angeles, this time focusing on the factors that exacerbated it, specifically the crack cocaine epidemic and the rise of hip-hop culture. The film opens with the controversial Boxcar Conspiracy, a theory that guns were intentionally made available in the Watts area to fuel gang violence. While its veracity is questioned, the documentary asserts that the influx of drugs and guns undeniably changed the community, leading to a dramatic increase in street gang violence. This new era of conflict was no longer about territory for its own sake, but about money and greed, with the drug trade changing the dynamics of power and relationships within the neighborhoods. A significant turning point discussed is the 1992 Gang Peace Treaty, where rival gangs like the Crips and Bloods came together, recognizing a common enemy, the police. The film argues that this was a moment of unity against systemic oppression. However, this unity was fleeting, and the documentary questions the evolution of black gangs. While other gangs such as the Hells Angels or the Japanese Yakuza have evolved into sophisticated criminal enterprises involved in real estate or drug trafficking, the film claims that black gangs have not, instead remaining trapped in a cycle of self-destruction and violence. The documentary suggests that this is due to a lack of focus on black first principles, instead prioritizing gang affiliations. It draws a powerful parallel between the political divisions of Democrats and Republicans and the gang colors of blue and red, suggesting that street gangs are simply mimicking a larger societal culture of division and violence. The film then delves into the influence of media and entertainment on violence. It highlights the power of manipulation and propaganda through media, particularly video games and music. Testimonials from community members express concern that violent video games act as simulators that desensitize young people and train them to be killers. The documentary also discusses the debate around violent movies and toys, noting that while in the past exposure to violence was limited, today it is pervasive. The film explores the thin line between entertainment and exploitation using a personal story of a young person who was consumed by the movie Colors and began to study the streets. The documentary also touches on the lack of media coverage for positive stories in the inner city, suggesting a bias towards sensationalism. A central argument of the documentary is the government's role in manipulating the music industry. It claims that the government, particularly the CIA, has been involved in promoting hip-hop music that glorifies violence. This is presented as a way to profit from and perpetuate violence in Black and brown communities. The film features artists and industry insiders who describe being encouraged to include beef and gang-related themes in their music, leading to a poison that has done more harm than racism in the last 10 years. While some argue that gangster rap is simply a reflection of reality, others, including older generations, lament the loss of uplifting soulful music in favor of content that promotes bloodshed and violence. The documentary argues that while hip-hop can be seen as a new lane for young men to escape the drug trade, it also perpetuates a dangerous cycle. The film, with deeply personal and tragic accounts of gun violence's impact on families. Individuals share stories of witnessing murder at a young age, losing family members to senseless shootings, and the lifelong trauma of these events. One man recounts seeing his cousin shot and killed on the 4th of July, while a woman shares the harrowing experience of losing her son and her grandson to gun violence. Another person describes being shot in the head at age 19, enduring multiple surgeries, and losing his vision. These stories serve as a raw and emotional final plea for unity and an end to the cycle of violence. The documentary ends with the powerful assertion that violence is not just an issue of the weapon but of the human heart, a problem that has existed since the first murder between brothers Cain and Abel. It leaves the audience with a stark image of the physical and emotional scars left by gun violence, from the visible injuries of a survivor to the internal howl of a grieving mother. The final part of the documentary presents a poignant and powerful exploration of gun violence's emotional and psychological toll, culminating in a call for community-led solutions. The film features heartbreaking testimonials from parents who have lost children to senseless gun violence, sharing stories of a 5-year-old losing his father in a store robbery, a mother whose 20-year-old daughter was killed just weeks after giving birth, and another who lost her son the day she almost had him come over. These accounts highlight the immense grief, trauma, and emotional numbness that ripple through families and communities. The film underscores that this is not just an issue of physical harm but of deep, lasting mental scars. A significant focus of the film is the mental health crisis within the Black community, which is exacerbated by gun violence. The documentary notes that mental health is often a taboo subject and many are reluctant to seek help due to historical mistrust of medical and mental health systems. The infamous Tuskegee study is cited as a key reason for this distrust, demonstrating how past atrocities continue to affect present-day health-seeking behaviors. The film argues that generational trauma is passed down through DNA, making children born into these communities more susceptible to the psychological effects of violence. It also points out the disparity in mental health resources, noting that while help is often swift for white communities after a mass shooting, similar resources are rarely provided in Black neighborhoods. The film critiques the systemic exploitation of violence. One interviewee powerfully states that the system views Black lives as a bag to be chased, with various entities from the police and courts to the coroner profiting from the cycle of violence. This business model, the film suggests, disincentivizes true solutions. This leads to the central theme of the film's conclusion: the need for community-driven solutions. Interviewees propose that true change requires addressing the root causes, symbolized by a story of pulling up weeds by the root instead of just cutting them at the surface. These solutions include community activism such as the Black Men March on LA, which seeks to hold police officers accountable by proposing initiatives like mandatory liability insurance and firearm revocation. The documentary concludes with several examples of these community-led initiatives. One man describes starting a softball league among rival Crip sets to foster unity and reduce internal gang violence. Another discusses the Fathers in Hip Hop group, which mentors young men in foster homes to show them positive examples of manhood and help them break the cycle of violence. The film also highlights a community-based approach to public safety with a group called Second Call, offering an alternative to calling the police for nonviolent issues like homelessness and mental health crises. The overarching message is that while politicians and celebrities can help, true lasting change must come from within the community itself, led by individuals with lived experience. The film ends with a call for open dialogue about mental illness and the collective healing of Black men, who are often the most harmed and the least helped. It emphasizes that this is a spiritual and emotional problem that requires vulnerability and a commitment to transforming communities from the inside out. If you enjoy watching this video, then subscribe to Angel Recaps for the latest movies explanation.